We are recording. This is Gateway API meeting for March 31st, 2021. I wanted to spend, I know we mentioned this a while ago, a few weeks ago, that it would be good just to get some feedback on what we were thinking about presenting at KubeCon. And we need to have KubeCon, this presentation recorded basically in the next week. And so based on that, I just wanted to, this is not going to be a formal presentation or anything like that, but I wanted to take maybe 15 or 20 minutes at the start of this meeting and just run through what we've been thinking about presenting and hopefully get some feedback as far as areas that we're missing out on, things that maybe we don't need to highlight as much or should highlight more, or anything else you can think of. So yeah, this should be visible to everyone. If it's not, let me know. And also hopefully my screen sharing is actually working.
It is working.
Wow, it's amazing. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is really simple. Just structured the presentation with really the first half going through an introduction to the API where we're talking about the goals, the resource model, and some of the key concepts around the API. And then we want to spend a fairly significant chunk of this presentation going through demos. So because at least for me, that's how I learn. I really like to see it in action to understand the different components. And I think we have good demos. And I've kind of scoped out, and I spent yesterday running through and before running through different implementations to make sure that the demos I wanted to do were possible. So right now I have scoped out basic demos using Trafic, Istio, Contour, and GKE. And we'll get into those a bit later. And there's a lot of different content we could choose for demos. And I'm not sure I chose the best or most compelling content. So when we get there, again, interested if we should be highlighting some other functionality or whatever it is. So for history, we go through and talk about the origins of Ingress in general, and what it prioritized and how simple it was and how widely used it was. And also the idea of how service started simple and it became larger and larger and started to include configuration for, all kinds of advanced concepts that just kind of got tacked on. And so the combination of those things led to the question, can we build a new API that can represent those load balancing concepts in a better way? And so go back through the history, KubeCon San Diego, I know many of you were there, and just trying to answer what's in scope, what problems are we trying to solve, and do we need new APIs to solve them? Added this somewhat classic picture of one of the first meetings, whatever, brainstorming sessions. I don't know. I know we had several at that KubeCon, and they evolved from there. I think shortly after that KubeCon, we started setting up weekly meetings, and yeah, here we are. So, and feel free to interrupt me at any point. Harry, you've also been involved in just, developing these slides. If there's anything you want to add or, give context on why things are the way they are, or what you think should change, yeah, all ears.
Go ahead, Rob. You're on it. And you're too generous.
Okay, so. Cool. All right. So the other thing is, and a lot of this concept is taken from docs where we already outlined some of the goals of our API. We want it to be role-oriented. We want it to be portable. We want it to be expressive, and we want it to be extensible. I know we have probably more goals than this, but I think this is kind of a good high-level way to describe what we're trying to do here. role, all of these feel like pretty core ideas that we're trying to solve for. So the next few slides we go through the different roles we're considering as we design this. I had this in a couple different places, and Harry suggested, Harry improved this a lot, we'll say. But I think we want to describe the idea of our our conformance levels at this stage. So I think that's really a key point of why we're trying to be portable and how we're trying to do it. Then the expressiveness, just covering some of the features that this enables. I know there's a lot more. And extensibility. Obviously, we want this to be an API that can be extended broadly across a wide set of use cases. And we know that we can't have everything in the core API. So we want to provide lots of extension points. If there are other extension points we should mention here, or if some of them are, whatever, definitely add a comment or let us know. Okay, so moving on from here, we've got resource model. This is, I think, a not terrible way of explaining how things work, that a gateway class can reference params, and this kind of all animates in. So you start with a gateway class, then params, and then each gateway class can be referenced by multiple gateways. Each gateway can select multiple routes. Each route can forward traffic to multiple services, and a backend policy can apply to multiple services. So that's like a really high level overview of the resources involved. And then we take this idea of, with that resource model, let's overlay the roles and show exactly how this relationship works.
Rob, what do you think about adding like a TCP router or another protocol in there? We talk about protocols, but we don't mention them in different places. So I was thinking if we can reinforce that this is not HTTP anymore, which is a big complaint we have had. Hold on. So
yeah, that's a really good point. One thing that you'll see throughout this presentation is we don't cover TCP. We only cover HTTP route in the current presentation. So yeah, that's a good point. Let me.
I can do that. Don't worry.
Okay, yeah. I forget how to add comments on slides, but yeah, that's a good idea. Cool. And then I just take some time and run through the core, resource types. So we've got gateway class, gateway, routes, etc. And then some key concepts. And the key concepts, I had a lot of ideas for what could potentially belong in here, but I'm trying to avoid putting anything in this section that we're also going to be demoing, that we can cover effectively with a demo. So because I think a demo is a better way than slides wherever possible, but some concepts are a bit more complex or would require more than one demo to properly show it. So, and we do have pretty limited time here. So gateway route binding, I think, is a key detail, but I'm again trying to find the right balance here, because we don't want to go too far into details for any one feature, because although I think the resource model as a whole is probably not going to change much, the specific details of, say, route binding, I imagine that's going to change. I don't know, maybe it'll just be tweaked, maybe we'll overhaul it more broadly. I don't know. But I'm hesitant to go too far into the details here. There are some slides where we could, I think this is a good way to describe the current relationship and say, okay, so in this case, kind matches, namespace matches, labels match, but the route is preventing it because it only allows, from the same namespace. And so that is the thing that's preventing this from working. And I think this is a really good description, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm really interested in feedback here because this is a good way to describe this works and this doesn't, but it could also make this presentation less relevant, say 6 months from now, if we change anything. And I realize a lot of things in this presentation are pretty specific to now, but this is one area where it feels like it's likely to change at least somewhat.
Yes, so I was sort of, I don't know if I did this first and then saw all the activity on the route binding selector updates. So I think I did it in the other order, but I completely agree, Rob. So I think maybe here we can gloss over the details, since this is like, this is probably going to change, right? So like I saw the slides, I was like, okay, how do I explain this? I fill that in. So let's maybe use the demo, because I think in the demo there is one place where you do explain how
Yeah.
route binding works. So we could use that, and instead focus on another aspect, I don't know,
Okay.
different protocols or TLS or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Is there like a use case we're trying to cover with this? Because those should always match regardless of how we implement the API. You know what I mean? Like the use case is I have an operator who wants to do this and a user who wants to do this. And this is how you would restrict that, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like thinking about a high level of use case kind of things versus the actual API, but maybe this helps as well. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. We really could be focusing more on specific user stories and how they could be achieved with this kind of API. And I think this really, right now, we've covered just the things that you can do without really going through many user stories. We'll get a little bit closer to that in the demos. But yeah, that's a good point. We could go into that a little bit more in this section as well. Yeah, good idea. The other section, and I have nothing here at all, but I was just trying to think of what other key concepts do we have that we can't really cover well in a demo, and TLS came to mind. Of course we could, but TLS feels like something that's a bit more difficult to demo easily, especially because there's a few different, it can be relatively complicated to demo the idea of, say, a route override. And I don't think we need to go into lots of detail here, but just saying, oh, by the way, you can specify TLS here or here. And, so given that, I think this TLS may belong better in this kind of section, in this kind of format than a demo, but this is the one section we haven't gotten to yet. So with that, we scoped out a few demos here. The implementations that each demo uses are relatively random. I think I started going through them in like an alphabetical order. I don't really know, whatever. If this may have to change. I know some implementations, in my experience, play nicer with other implementations than some. Like that. My testing with these different implementations shows that the current state, different things do better for different demos. So these specific implementations that we're using to demo may change slightly, but the content I think will stay similar on that. But again, very open to feedback on this. The key goal here was to demo with a wide variety of implementations. I didn't want to reuse the same implementation for a different demo kind of thing. I wanted to show this is a community project, a community API, and you can use these same APIs with Contour or Istio or whoever it happens to be. So the first demo, I wanted to kind of just, let's say, create a very simple use case. I wanted to show the YAML that was involved in your most simple configuration. So let's say we start with Contour, it targets a route, which has a service deployment, etc. Really straightforward. And then show how that all works. And then take a step back and say, oh, by the way, you could also spin up an Istio gateway and target that same full stack. And it will work the same way and show requests going through Istio or Contour and getting the same response. It's a really simple demo, but I think it helps show a couple concepts. One being the loose coupling between route and gateway, but two, the idea that these same APIs work for for different implementations, which I think is a key goal here. But again, the specific implementations here can change. And if there's for any of these demos, if you think there's something that's more valuable that we should highlight, let me know. But this was just, I wanted to have one demo that started very simple and showed end-to-end support kind of thing. So yeah, this walks through the approximate process for this demo. But yeah, open feedback on these. The next one I think, header matching is kind of a unique concept or a new concept as far as core Kubernetes APIs go. So that felt like one that was useful and interesting to highlight here. So in this case, we have a single route that and two services, a stable service and a canary service, and we're using header matching to target the canary service. So in this example, we have a simple gateway. It's using the traffic gateway class, and you can see that this also allows us to highlight the route selection process, and then shows us how header matching works and how path matching works. So I think this is really, again, a relatively simple thing to demo. And again, the implementation that's actually doing this could change. I don't think that's critical. I just think it's important to have different implementations covering these. Then the last demo, I think this one is relatively unique to GKE, but I think anyone, these are using entirely open source APIs, and I think it's cool to show the intersection between what SIG multi-cluster has been doing and SIG network has been doing, and kind of the new APIs on both fronts and how they can kind of merge together. So this is a more complicated demo, but we have 3 clusters in this case. We have a config cluster that includes a gateway and a route, and then 2 clusters that route targets. The cluster 1 has a service and a deployment, and when you create a service export in cluster 1, that results in a service being imported in the config cluster, and the same in cluster 2. So the HTTP route is targeting the service import in both service imports in the config cluster and splitting traffic between those clusters. So this is our multi-cluster gateway. You can see the gateway class that's being used here is a GKE one in this case. And then you can see our route is, again, showing the selection, but then our route in this case is forwarding to services representing 2 different clusters and weighting traffic evenly. So you've got 50%. I probably shouldn't use 50 here because that makes it look like percent, which it isn't. anyway, so store in cluster 1 and store in cluster 2 is what this is targeting. There's many different ways to do this, but this is one way that works using the existing APIs. And so again, just throwing a screen recording here of actually applying that YAML and showing the traffic getting split across. I'm using Who Am I pods, which show you kind of the cluster each request is going to, pod name and many other things. And then the other concept I wanted to highlight here, and this can really go in anywhere, but I think this is also an interesting thing. So instead of what we had before, which was splitting traffic between two clusters, you might want to send all traffic to cluster 1 and mirror it to cluster 2. And so you can do that with request mirroring. So similar concept. And again, it just kind of works. And another screen recording. And that's the extent of the demos I currently have thought of, but there's a lot more. And I'm trying to find, the appropriate amount of time here. We have probably between 25 and 30-ish minutes to try and cover as much as we can. So any additional demo we add, we have to cut something else, I'm thinking, unless we just talk really fast. And so, some things, header modification, that's another new concept. The idea of, selecting routes across namespaces, I think is really cool. Advanced TLS config, custom route filters, and then really, like I think Harry had mentioned earlier, anything to do with L4 would be great to demo or show or talk about in more ways than we currently have. So I want to at least mention these are other new things that are included here. But if any of these feel like things we should try and, push up into a demo, yeah, we should talk about it. But I've spent a lot of time talking. There's a few more slides left, but I think the demo content is something I'd really like to get some feedback on. So of the demo content I've shown, does that seem reasonable? Are there other things we should be highlighting instead? I don't know. Open it up.
I think it's pretty impressive, the demo list that you provided there, especially doing the multi-cluster.
Cool. Okay, yeah, well, I will, yeah, no, I'm hoping that's a good way to kind of cap it off. And, anytime you get to demo two, new sets of APIs to get working together, it kind of shows, how the Kubernetes community is a pretty cool thing. Yeah.
I like that you're showing the different implementations and also starting off with a very simple use case. Just, important to crawl, walk, run.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah, well, if anyone thinks of anything here, any changes, we're gonna probably have to start recording this in a couple days, so we're not far out. But if anyone has ideas for changing things, adding new things, whatever, this presentation should be visible to anyone. Comment away, whatever. Yeah, and thank you also. I know I've reached out to some of you as I've had questions as I'm trying to, demo your specific implementation, and gotten a lot of help. So thank you to everyone who's helped along the way. So roadmap, I don't know. I don't know if logos are the best thing here, but this is definitely the most visual way to represent this. And this is really just showing these are the organizations that are either already supporting or working on supporting these APIs, and we expect there will be lots more in the months to come. Hopefully it's okay. I know everyone has like their own little brand guidelines, so hopefully, something like as small as this isn't too big of an issue. And I don't think we need to, because we're recording this a month before it's actually going to be presented, we can't really get into specifics of what is actually live or not live, because we could be wrong by the time it actually rolls out. So I think something generic of, these are all being worked on, and yeah. And this roadmap is probably the thing where we'll get most into trouble, for sure. I think I'm way too optimistic here. I like to set ambitious goals, but I think especially this one I'm going to regret. We'll see. But anything else that you think we should include on a roadmap, or things that we should just not talk about, welcome here. And yeah, that's it. That's the extent of this this presentation. Yeah, if you have thoughts on things we should include or not, let me know. But I know we've gone over the time I said we were going to take for this, so we should get into actual API work. Thanks again to everyone who helped along the way, and yeah, hopefully we can get the last little bits of this together and to get it recorded soon.
Yeah, this is great stuff. This is mostly all of it is Rob and not me. I've been out for a little while due to COVID. So, but yeah, this is great. I think Rob, you're going to do a pretty good job with the demos, right? Like just talking about an API, but then actually showing that people are serious about it and they are already implementing it. I think that gets the message across that this is happening and it's a big deal.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rob, for it's obviously put a lot of time and effort into this, and appreciate you doing that and highlighting the implementations as part of the presentation.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thanks for your work. I think it's good. Looks good. The only thing I can think of what might be helpful is, and it may not be fitting for this presentation, but I know folks ask a lot about how is this different than Ingress? That's a whole different bucket of worms. But like, why would I use this over Ingress, or how does this evolve, or how does this differ from that? But that could be a whole different talk in a different place.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and we kind of cover it as, we see these problems in Ingress and these problems in service, and here's how we think we can help with this new set of APIs, but we never really come back to that. Like, we talk about it a little bit in history, but we never come back and say, so after all that, Ingress is going to exist forever, or for a very long time. How do you decide? So that's a really good point. That's probably worth at least giving a high level overview of in the talk. If we don't, it's for sure going to be one of the first questions that's asked after the talk. So yeah, really good find. Yeah, I'll make a note of that. Yeah. So and then yeah, thanks to everyone for the feedback here. It's pretty. I feel lucky to get to. I feel like I'm standing on, or we're standing on, shoulders of giants here. Get to give a presentation about all this work that so many people have done, and just kind of showcasing. Sometimes at KubeCon I've given presentations that are work covering work that I've mostly done, and that's okay. But like this, there's just so much. The scope is so broad, and there's so many different people working on it, that the demos become so much more cool, because, well, there's so much more that's possible. So yeah, I'm just appreciative to the community for enabling all this really cool stuff. Yeah, it makes me excited about where we're headed, and this is only V1 Alpha 1.
It's nice we have things to demo.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thanks to, yeah, I know it was when we made this CFP back in the day, we weren't sure. We hoped that we'd have at least a couple implementations ready to demo, and yeah, we've well exceeded that. So great. Yeah, let me keep on running here. I wanted to again remember the O.3 milestone. We've got a few things that merged in the past week. We've covered just about everything in here in the last meeting, so I don't want to bring anything back up, but just to highlight that hopefully in less than a month, we'll have sufficient content to release an O.3.0 release. And again, at least my vision for this release would be kind of our last major additions to V1 Alpha 1 before we switched gears entirely and started moving to V1 Alpha 2 and started taking on kind of those bigger changes that would potentially be breaking, such as the changes to route gateway selection. And I know we have a variety in the V1 Alpha 2 milestone, but I kind of wanted to separate these out and do additive non-breaking changes first, just so that we could make that V1 Alpha 2 release a little bit smaller and more manageable, because we'll already have at least some breaking changes in there. So if we can do as much as we possibly can before that, that seems like it might be a bit more manageable. So I don't think there's anything particularly new in here, other than that we've closed a few things out. But if anyone has time, capacity to take on some of these things, that'd be great. And I also want to reiterate here that not everything in this milestone needs to get in for the release to happen. It's just, these are things that could be relevant and could make it in. And probably sometime soon-ish, we should add some kind of prioritization here as far as what we absolutely need to get into this milestone. But at least right now, what I'm seeing is almost everything is, additive and not critical, just nice to have. Yeah. Cool. Well, let me move on over to issue triage, because there's been a fair amount of good discussion, both in issues and PRs. I want to move over to PRs because I think we got a pretty significant PR from you, Damien. And since you're on the call, maybe you can give a little bit of background on what you're thinking here.
Yes, as part of the Contour implementation, there's kind of two controller components. And so, we discussed within the Contour community, maybe we should create a package, a validation package that can be used since the webhook is not implemented. Then as part of that discussion, I was like, well, maybe it actually makes sense to have this upstream in Gateway API. And the thinking is, again, the webhook implementation is in the works. And this is a validation package similar to, as the description shows, the networking API's validation package. So if implementations like the webhook could utilize this package along with implementations like Contour and others that don't use the webhook, and again, it's modeled off the networking API's validation package. And right now, by no means is it comprehensive, right? I just wanted to kind of put something together and get feedback from the community. And I think right now it's only doing the host name validation of the gateway listener. Now, with the intent, if we move forward with this, that myself and others contribute to expand this validation package. And then I believe I linked the webhook implementation PR, and I've reached out to Chris to kind of get his input as well of having him either update that PR, or if we submit a follow-on PR where that implementation would leverage this package.
Yeah, this is really cool. I wanted to have a bit more discussion around this. When I first thought of it, well, when I first heard of the idea of a validation package here, one of my first questions was, it seems like this is trying to provide information that would be used both for a validating webhook and also to populate status. Is that accurate?
Yes. So my thinking is that an implementation, would make the call to validate a gateway in this example, and then use the results of that as part of gateway status. If there were any errors, and be able to use a status message to pull in any of these errors to provide more context within status.
Okay, yeah, so that's where I was trying to, it seems like it would be difficult to, return an error that is suitably, suitable for both a webhook and I think this is possible. I'm imagining that you want, in some cases at least, the same kind of validation to apply to either. So something like either the webhook doesn't exist in a cluster, or I don't know what. And so you want something that can also be meaningful as far as status, but if you run some specific validation, how do you know what status to set if it fails, and where that status should be set? And maybe I'm thinking, too specifically about this, but it feels like it could be really cool if we could do this in a generic enough way that you could have both here, but I'm not as sure about the specifics of how we could accomplish that, I guess is what I'm saying. And I guess to take that a step further, if we're not completely sure how implementations will use this yet, I guess it would just be helpful for me to see an example of an implementation using this kind of library to populate status, as well as the webhook hooking into this and using this kind of library to, populate responses.
All right, I could kind of dig into how an implementation as well as the webhook would utilize this for status.
And this is, to be clear, like, I think this is a really cool idea. I just want to make sure that before we merge this in, we have like a clear idea of how it will be used, and that the interfaces we have in here, the patterns we have in here, work well for both. But I'm a huge fan of having this kind of thing.
Okay.
Any other feedback on this concept? All right, cool. We'll leave it at that. Thanks. I know there's already been some people that have reviewed this. But yeah, this is exciting. I'm glad to see some work on validation here. Let me jump back over to issues. I know I'm kind of going back and forth, but I want to at least cover the things that came in the past week that we have missed, or that maybe haven't had enough discussion. I think a number of us commented on this one already. Got a good question about, so if weight is 0, what is the standard response here? And the, should we, if that's the only backend, what happens? And I think the conclusion we came to here is that 503 is probably the standard. It's not clear that we need to make that something like that is conformant. Yeah, so should instead of must. Is there really a significant difference between should and must in terms of conformance?
I mean, we only conform for must, right? Not
Okay.
for should, or I'm not sure. Or maybe it's like conformance test is allowed to fail. We don't have a framework, so I'm not sure how we talk about it.
Yeah. But whatever our vocabulary is, I think this is something that should be a recommendation, but not a requirement.
Correct.
And yeah, so traffic should never reach a backend if weight is 0, but traffic should go through any filters or must. I think must is what you said, Harry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. This feels like such an edge case. It's hard for me to understand why you would have a backend with weight 0, but then also apply filters before. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I mean, why would not just remove the backend and then put the backend in when you actually need the backend with
Yeah.
a non-zero weight? So it's sort of weird. Yeah. I mean,
I guess one way.
Go ahead.
I guess one way of saying it is we have, if I'm remembering correctly, we have considered a backend optional. We don't require forward to have a length of 1. I don't think, anyways. And
That's
so,
right. And
go ahead.
that's right. And that was the case that we thought about where, we wanted to run some filters and not forward the request. And we used to have, I don't remember what's the case right now, but we used to have weight to be minimum 1. I vaguely recall that we updated to allow weight 0. I'm not sure why we did that. I don't recall why we did
Yeah.
that.
I think weight 0 was really just a way to simplify. You want to leave something around in your config so it's a little bit easier to spin something back up or down, but it is really identical in concept to a backend not existing. That is my understanding of it, and it seems to match the comments here that the way we treat a backend with weight 0 is if the backend didn't exist.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. We have so many places where we have these sorts of edge cases due to different ways of representing the same thing.
Yes.
Is there any guidance from, like, in general, API design, how to solve this?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, and I don't know, but you're right. We are struggling with this concept in several places where we have more than one way to do the same thing, and when we do, we may be adding unnecessary complexity. It is a tough balance.
Yeah, and let's see. I mean, I think more implementations coming in will expose more such areas, and maybe we need to get to simplifying the API more.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, right. That's if we simplify it too far, we'll be right back at Ingress, which but
we have come full circle.
right. Yeah, the other side is we go way too far the other way, and no one wants to use the API because it's just way too complicated. So we'll see. I don't know what the correct balance between those two is.
Same.
Yeah. There was a little bit of follow-up on this issue, the gateway route binding discussion. It was just a couple comments here. I I definitely agree that the complex use case, this enables very complex configuration for better or for worse. I think Harry's comment is that in the most verbose example of this, you have 4 selectors that can all be relevant. You can have route and namespace selector from the gateway down, and a gateway and namespace selector from the route up. And that admittedly can feel quite confusing. And now that I'm thinking about this further, it's actually per listener. So one thing that I don't think we've properly accounted for yet in any, regardless of this, is that we consider a gateway having admitted a route when any listener has admitted that route. But it's not obvious right now that, this listener did, but this one didn't, or vice versa in the multi-listener use case. Yeah, I don't know. Did you have anything, any comments, Harry? I know you.
No, I
had a
just
bit.
wanted. I read the doc and I read this and I was like, okay. I was still like I had some examples. I was just trying to put the API in my head together. So I wanted to confirm, like, is that really the case? I think we have discussed this API and this specific solution a couple of times. I wanted to make sure. So that's good to know. It's certainly a little complex, but then what I'm thinking is maybe how Danian has proposed a package for validation. Implementations could share, like give a listener, and the shared package gives the set of routes that should bind to that listener, and all of the maintainers can share that piece of logic. I think that's pretty core to the API, and implementations wouldn't have that difference, and that's how we can make sure that we have correctness and we have low maintenance burden if we decide to go down this route.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. We even the current model is relatively complex with all the different ways you can do this. We don't show the most complex scenario very often or at all, but there are a lot of different factors in play in our current system too. So I would agree that some kind of shared logic here is going to one, simplify life for implementations, but also help ensure that implementations are consistent.
Correct. Yes. There was one comment that I did not put in. I'm not sure about this, but I think so. We are going to remove the from list. So right now, what routes can do is they can specify the list of gateways to which that specific route can bind to. That feature won't be possible in this model. Is that right?
Yeah, that was, yes. Yeah. So,
So, go ahead.
yeah. So, yeah, that actually came from the doc has a tiny bit more context, but not much. I think some of the comments that led to that got removed, or I don't know, as I changed things around. But the idea was this all comes to the idea of loose coupling, right? So one of the selling points of this relationship in my mind is that you have different roles, a gateway admin and a route admin. And the route admin does not need to be aware of what the gateway admin is doing and vice versa. So in let's say a more traditional, day 2 operation, let's say, right? Your gateway admin is trying to replace a gateway with either a different implementation or a newer version of the same implementation, whatever it happens to be. And so their solution is, let me spin up an entirely new gateway beside this existing one. It will select the same labels, do all the same stuff, but I just want to test traffic going through this new gateway while I have the old one in place. and then gradually, send traffic over to my new gateway as I'm confident that it works the way I want it to and it's configured properly. That is, I think, a really compelling use case of our API, and it falls apart completely if routes are specifying gateway names. Okay, I shouldn't say completely, but it requires everyone who owns a route to update their route to reference a new gateway, and it makes that transition very painful. And admittedly, not everyone is going to be replacing gateways in that manner by, spinning up a new one, testing it, and then spinning down the old one. But I think it's possible, and especially since we're trying to sell this as, a role-based API where these roles can operate somewhat independently, and they each have their own contracts of, if you're a route owner, label your route this way, or select gateways of this class and we'll take care of you. Like, that's what the route owner needs to know. And the gateway owner needs to know, okay, I need to do this, and that is the contract I'm fulfilling. And that kind of loose coupling, I think, is what we're trying to do here. And the reference by name got in the way of that. And from my perspective, the reference by name is not particularly powerful because, if a gateway admin can change what a name means, they can just, create another gateway of the same name. And there's so many different ways to do this, right? That I think the slightly looser coupling that label selection enables is more powerful here.
Yeah, okay, so that was a very, very good answer. So thank you so much, Rob, for that. All of that makes a lot of sense. And I think I just wanted to know, like, we're, explicitly doing that, and I was missing this context. So I think I'm late to the party, so I'm making you repeat a bunch of stuff here. But
No,
this is good. Yeah.
It's good. It's good to revisit these things because I will be the first to admit that this proposal is quite complex, especially if you fill out every potential bit of config. Trying to do the math of what actually matches what is going to get complicated. I think this simple example is fantastic, but the further down the tree you get, the messier it becomes. So it's good to reevaluate these ideas as we go.
Yeah, I think the most verbose case that we did talk about, I think nobody's going to use it because nobody can possibly use it, but people will use a
Right.
subset of those. So people will use like subset configurations of those, and I think the bigger challenge will be properly testing it. So you probably need to do some conformance test, which can help all of us to make sure that we are implementing route selection and binding correctly. So, but this is good. I'm going to go back and read a little more and spend a little more time to understand this and maybe come up with some questions. But yeah, this is where we are. It's not the best thing, but it solves most problems. So yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks for good feedback here. I don't know if there's any particular, most of the rest of the content here. I know we've had a variety of PRs that have been updated in the past week. In the last, I think we have time for basically one more PR in our window here. Is there anything that someone wants to call out as needing more discussion?
I'm a little split on the adding that the first PR in this list, the 5
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we already have that discussion, but I don't have a problem adding that field and calling it done. It's just the reasoning behind that is a slippery slope. That's my concern.
Yeah, you're right. It is a very slippery slope. It is a frustrating problem, not just to us, but anyone who's using CRDs. So an upstream fix would be ideal. a recent comment I added to Danian has more context here. But so short answer is this is intentional in upstream, and there was a PR that is now basically 2 years old that would have fixed this, and it got some, I don't want to say negative feedback, but not positive feedback, and ended up getting closed or became stale and got closed. And I need to follow up and see what exactly happened here. But what we're doing right now is, we're doing a full JSON path match, and we're getting the very first match and outputting that every single time. So what that means is we get this, and unfortunately, this is not a kubectl thing. This is a API server thing. So even if this were to get fixed, it would get fixed in, say, Kubernetes 122 at this point. And this assumes that this is actually considered a bug and not a intentional feature. And then what you have for anyone who's using an earlier version of Kubernetes is very confusing kubectl output because you'll get the first item in the list always and nothing more. So in this example of connected gateways, what you would get is the first gateway that was connected to a route, which works in some cases, but is very confusing if you happen to have more than one gateway and you still only see one, because it's enough to make you think it's working, but that's not actually what it's doing. It's just showing you the first one on the list. So even if we fix this in upstream, it results in a very confusing experience for anyone using a version of Kubernetes before the fix. Which leads me to think we probably need some kind of custom fields, at least as a short-term patch for this, but maybe these aren't mutually exclusive things. The fix itself seems straightforward enough. We just need to find, this is an area outside of a SIG I work with, like we need to understand why this didn't get merged in. Maybe it was seen as too much of a risk. I don't know. But yeah, this is where we ran into some issues. The fix itself seems relatively straightforward to me. But yeah, so this is a complex thing and I don't have a good answer for it. But I think because any fix is still not really going to solve it for us in upstream, we probably need some kind of custom thing for now, and probably until everyone is using a Kubernetes version that is newer than, say, 122, or whenever we're able to get something fixed upstream. I don't know.
That's fair. But my concern here is, I think there will be further places where kubectl and CRD gets in the way, or us being out of tree gets in the way.
Yeah.
So we need to at some point draw a line. These are the things we are willing to do and these are not. I don't know how to
You're
draw
right.
that line. That we need to do that first, rather than later point of time, future us or somebody else trying to add in another field, or another feature, saying that, oh, you did it in the past, we need to do this, and it improves user experience, and it all makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense to do it, but we know that we are already adding hacks at a stage where we are still relatively early.
Yeah, I've been meaning to show up to an API machinery meeting, but as you would guess, both SIG auth, SIG APM, this is a very common time for SIGs to meet, and this overlaps with auth and API machinery at least. So anyways, with that said, we do need to reach out to them and understand what plans are, if this experience will get any better anytime soon. As an example, if this truly is considered a bug, if we can pick it back, but I don't think it is considered a bug, etc. But The other thing you mentioned is also entirely relevant. And that's why we have to be out of tree. And I don't think we do. Being out of tree, being CRDs definitely gives us a lot more flexibility. It allows us to move at our own pace outside of the, KEP release cycle, etc. And it has enabled us to move both faster and slower, which has been great as we're iterating on an API. But as the API stabilizes, maybe it is going to make more sense for this API to move into tree. And then you're right, the capabilities we get there are so much better. You write a function for your kubectl get output and your kubectl describe output that has all the custom logic in it you could ever want. So yeah, that makes these kinds of problems go away. But it introduces the other problems that are being tied to a Kubernetes release cycle. This is a bigger topic. Probably a good starting point is a doc or an issue or something that starts tracking the pain points we are encountering when interacting with CRDs. And that could help us make a better decision on where these APIs belong longer term, or if we start making more and more exceptions like this.
That's fair. Okay, let me start just a basic parent issue for tracking, out of tree CRD problems, and then we can start to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you. Or go ahead.
I'm just wondering, it seems like the options here are confusing output, an awful hack to get good output, but there's also the option of just not printing that output in the OC get kubectl get output, right?
Yeah, you're right. The third option here is to do a Kubernetes plugin or kubectl plug. Well, that another option is just don't print anything at all, and people can rely on YAML output, etc.
Right.
Or do a kubectl plugin, and I've written kubectl plugins before. They're not particularly difficult to create. Like everything, they're a lot more difficult to maintain than create. And also, it adds an extra usability burden if somebody has to, jump through those hoops to get usable or understandable output. But you're right. This is the kind of thing that probably deserves a doc or further discussion before we actually go ahead and implement, make this kind of compromise. It would be good to outline the other options we have here. Yeah, I can take that as an action item. Cool. All right. Well, I know we're past time here, so thank you everyone for staying on. We will talk more next week. We're making good progress here. It's been fun to actually try out everyone's implementation here. Thanks to everyone for your work, and it's cool to see this all coming together. We will talk to everyone next week. Have a good one.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.